We were recently on a road trip and our older son was driving. Let me tell you, it is so great to have another driver in our house. And on this particular day, I had a little bit of work that I needed to finish, so I was able to pull out my laptop and get this work done while we were still on the road. And then I could know that these work emails wouldn't be hanging over my head when we got to our destination. But I also knew that it would help motivate my new driver if I told him he could pick the playlist as well. So he hooked up his phone to Bluetooth, pulled up his Spotify list of favorite songs, and hit play. Now he drove for about 90 minutes, and again, I was super grateful that he was willing to do this. But he's also a teenager. And no matter how many of my favorite songs I've exposed him to over the years, there was no way any of them would ever be on his playlist. And so after 90 minutes, I admit, I was very ready for our road trip to have a new soundtrack. If you're on a road trip, what type of music helps you get through the drive? Do you have something in mind? Is it a nostalgic playlist or an upbeat one that helps you stay awake? Now, for a minute, think about a time you've thrown a dinner party. I'm guessing you might choose a different type of playlist or soundtrack to accompany your evening. You might want music that's a little softer or smoother so that people can easily carry on conversation. If you're at the gym, you need something with a good tempo, music that helps you get through those repetitions or those miles on the treadmill. I love listening to the news on the radio when I'm driving all by myself. But when my kids are in the car, I'd rather talk to them than have the reporters talking to me. When it comes to music, we change the soundtrack to fit the situation. There's this author that I really like. His name is Jon Acuff, and he suggests that this very thing is helpful when it comes to our tendencies to overthink. There's no reason for any of us to get stuck in our heads spinning on thoughts that keep us in unhealthy cycles. In fact, there are moments in our lives when we could all benefit from a new soundtrack, a new script, a new message that leads us to be honest with our feelings, to take action rather than live perpetually inside our heads, to be willing to live without a step-by-step answer to the problems we face. Acuff in his book, Soundtracks, reminds us that sometimes the world throws a lot of noise at us. But we need to remember that we have the ability and the agency to turn down the dial on that noise. Okay, here we are, faced with these new playlists, new soundtracks, new scripts, however you want to describe them. But let's be honest, veering towards one of them can be scary. And fear, when it's deep and heavy and personal, it doesn't go away on its own. Sometimes we need other people to help us face our fears. And sometimes, probably all the time if we're honest, we need God to help us too. In the book of Deuteronomy, in the Old Testament, we hear a lot about history and laws and covenants, but we also read the continued story of the Israelites who were no longer living in slavery, but were free in their promised land. And they're figuring out what it means to be a new community. In chapter 31, Moses, who had been their faithful leader for so long, he stands up before them and he says it's time for him to step down. He's old, and he's no longer able to be their leader. And in fact, there are more new lands for them to explore beyond the Jordan River, and it's like Moses can see their shoulders tense when he says this to them. Wait, but Moses, you were the one who led us before. We can't do this on our own. It's okay, Moses says. Your fears, they're natural. Your feelings are valid, but you have to know this. Just like God did when we crossed the Red Sea, God will cross this river, this new river before you also. This is a promise, and God keeps God's promises. And Joshua, Moses continues, he's going to be my successor. So there will still be a leader guiding you. And just like I did, this new leader, Joshua, he will encounter some challenges. He'll cross that new river, and he'll find some resistance from other nations, other people. But then Moses says this to the people in verse 6. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Is it scary to get out of our heads? To be vulnerable and expose our emotions and our shortcomings and our issues? Yes, it is. There's no doubt about this. But if there's one thing I hope you remember, it's this. Be strong and courageous. You don't have to write or flip or discover this new script on your own. Trust your community, and importantly, trust God too.